Morning, good afternoon, or good evening. My name is Pei-Chia. I am professor of sociology at National Taiwan University. Today, we are celebrating the publication of our special issue, The Emerging Second Generation in Asia. So let me share what people are slowly entering. Let me share the PowerPoint. Okay. Okay, like I mentioned earlier, this special issue was just published this month. The issue is co-edited by me and my colleague Minjeong Kim from San Diego State University. So we're going to start to give you some brief introduction about this project, this issue, and then today we have 5 authors who will present their papers briefly. So to start with, I'm sure all of you know that cross-border marriages are a regional phenomenon in Asia. Over the past few years, past few decades, several hundred women from Southeast Asia, China, are married to men, mostly working class, in Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, Singapore, and Hong Kong. Their children are now reaching adulthood, but we still know very little about their lived experiences and their identity formation. So that's a departure of our project. We started by hosting an international conference on transnational families and the second generation in Asia, which took place at National Taiwan University in July 2023. The event was sponsored by Global Asia Research Center and also Taiwan Social Resilience Research Center at National Taiwan University. So the issue includes 6, including 6 different cases about the second generation in different countries, including my own research about the Chinese second generation in Taiwan, and Minjeong and Ilju's research about South Korea, Youwa Zhang's research about the Xingyimings in Hong Kong, and also Professor Kathiravelu research about the second generation in Singapore. She unfortunately cannot join us today because she's right now based in Iceland, and it's impossible for her to join because the time differences. But I'd like to urge you to read this article because Singapore is actually a very interesting and different cases in this region, because Singapore has established a very institutionalized scheme of racial identity. And this second generation or children of new immigrants, they have to assimilate themselves into these different racial identities, either Malay or Chinese or Indian, etc. And then we have 2 articles taking a perspective of transnationalism to look at the second generation who return and live in Vietnam, which is Hyun King's very interesting research, and also Masako Kudo's research about Japanese Pakistani Muslim youth who have partaken a multinational journey. So before we start individual presentation, I'd like to invite my co-editors, Minjeong Kim, to give us some brief ideas about what we have identified about the major features of the second generation in Asia. Minjeong, would you like to take over?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Lan. Before I continue our introduction presentation, first I'd like to express my special thank you to Dr. Lan for inviting me to this very meaningful project. It's been really an honor and privilege working with you and all of our contributors. So I turn to some of the contextual issues in Asia that shape unique second generation experience in Asia. So the majority of the second generation in North America and Europe are from co-ethnic marriages with both parents with the immigration background. The discussions about the second generation, was framed within immigrant families and communities versus the mainstream dominant society. But in Asia, a lot of second generation youth are from internationally married couples, usually with an immigrant mother and a native-born father. So a larger proportion of the second generation in Asia are children of mixed cultural heritage with a complex set of identity options. So scholars have highlighted their mother's disadvantaged position in terms of gender, socioeconomic status, and national origin, and situated in intermarriage and surrounded by husband and his family, immigrant mothers, and in turn, the second generation children are usually distant from the mother's kin networks and ethnic community. So next slide, please. So it is important to consider modes of context of reception to better understand the identity formation of the second generation. And they include the state policies, societal values, and ethnic relations. And we first pay attention to Asian receiving societies' landscapes of ethnic identity and how children of mixed heritages are identified. For example, East Asian societies, as you know, often perceive themselves as ethnically homogeneous and traditionally held monoethnic ideologies about nationhood and membership. In South Korea, damunhwa, multicultural, became an official term, replacing the outdated term 혼혈, mixed blood. Unfortunately, multicultural still functions as a euphemism of a foreignness differentiated from pure Koreans. In Japan, the term konketsuji for children of Japanese women and U.S. soldiers was replaced with hafu, which still implies ambivalent or negative racial connotations. More recently, the term taburu emerged as another alternative term. In Taiwan and Hong Kong, intermarriages with PRC Chinese present a unique case. Despite the fact that they can be perceived as co-ethnic marriages, the political and linguistic differences remain significant and become subjects of contestation in everyday life. Next slide, please. Another important context of reception is the state's policies toward the first-generation immigrants. Aaron Chung describes Asian countries as the developmental migration state where migration governance reflects developmental logic that prioritizes immigrants' utility for national developmental goals rather than democracy or equality. For instance, Asian governments have provided social support and programs for marriage immigrants based on the expectation that their primary contribution will be raising the second generation, which has been critically assessed in my own work on ethnicized maternal citizenship and Dr. Lan's work on reproductive assimilation. In recent years, we have also seen how the developmental logic influences state policies for the second generation. So, for example, Dr. Lenz argues that the emerging trends of neoliberal multiculturalism frame the second generation's cultural and social capital as an asset for globalized national development. Next slide, please. Transnationalism has become an increasingly prominent context for the second generation, and in Asia, they experience transnational movements stemming from particular circumstances and situations. Unlike in North America, where the second generation and the 1.5 generation are often lumped together, in Asia, the 1.5 generation who are relocated to the host society when they are young are different from the second generation because the former may not be of mixed race or mixed heritage. As immigrant parents strategize through return or circular migration after marital disruption or stepwise migration, their second generation children are brought into a transnational way of living. And here, the traditional distinction between sending and receiving countries become blurred for them. The transnational linkage is not between the immigrant parents' sending country and the destination country in the traditional sense, but between the mother's country and the father's country, or the immigrant mother's sending country and destination country. So with this context in mind, today 5 presenters will discuss their cases on the emerging second generation in Asia. Thank you again for joining us.
Okay, thanks very much. So from now on, we'll invite our authors to present their own article. We're going to start with the case of South Korea, the article by Minjeong Kim and Ilju Kim. Let me briefly introduce them. Dr. Minjeong Kim is a sociologist at San Diego State University, and Dr. King, Ilju Kim, she is also a sociologist at Sophia University in Tokyo. So the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna share my slide. Okay, can you see my slide?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you so much for the great opportunity to contribute to this special issue. So I'm gonna present the work that I did with Minjeong Kim, Dr. Kim, and it's titled The Second Generation's Perception of Public Support Program for Multicultural Families in South Korea. So both Dr. Kim and I have studied citizenship practices of marriage immigrants in South Korea, and we were aware that previous studies, including Minjeong's Dr. Kim's study, have critically examined the meanings of state and public programs for marriage immigrants that are often offered as part of multicultural family support, and how they usually take an assimilationist approach, marginalizing immigrant women's ethnic identity and undermine their cultural citizenship. So, and since these programs also target the children of these so-called multicultural families who are increasingly entering adulthood in recent years, we decided to critically examine how the second generation engages with such programs. So we would like to start by introducing this quote from one of our study participants. Of course, I liked having a few days off, but I did not like the reason. Sure, I have a Filipino mother and a Korean father, but is that a reason for me to get extra vacation days? No matter what the reasons were, I don't think it was actually for my benefit. So Sang-min, who is a 27-year-old technician, talked about extra vacation days he received for visiting his mother's country while he was serving in the army. But as you could see, he questioned whether these benefits were actually for his benefit. So as you can see in this slide, the Korean government is offering programs for the second generation in various legal and policy capacities. And these programs include counseling services, mentoring programs, financial support for school meals, and extra vacation days and support to visit their mother's country, as Sang-min's case illustrates. And so as you can see, these social programs were offered for a wide range of age groups throughout the second generation's life course. So we would like to ask, how do the second generation perceive and make sense of social programs and opportunities for multicultural families and children? How do their perceptions shape their positionality and sense of belonging within Korean society? And we applied Nancy Fraser's social justice framework, which is an integrative approach to social justice, which focuses on both redistribution, which is a just distribution of material resources, and also on recognition of minority identities and cultures. And this two-pronged approach is to achieve the norms of parity of participation, where social arrangements permit all adult members of society to interact with one another as peers. And we especially focus on the role of the state as primary definers and generators of misrecognition. So we draw on in-depth interviews with 13 second-generation youth, and you can find the details of our methods in our paper. So we identified 3 emerging themes. First is beneficial. So younger participants who attended school in more recent years reported that they did not experience or witness the misuse of the term 다문화, which means multicultural, being used as a pejorative epithet as in the past. And in line with this, many participants claimed that the social programs for the second generation were beneficial to them, providing valuable opportunities. So they found that social programs were beneficial because they provided practical values of extra support, such as scholarship and mentoring opportunities. And some also were encouraged to reconsider or embrace their multicultural identities. And some also came to see their mixed heritage as a strength and fostered a will to incorporate their multicultural identities into their future endeavors. However, these programs often do not acknowledge the second generation's cultural heritage, mixed cultural heritage. So recipients were usually represented as members of just multicultural families, and their individual ethnic identity, especially their mother's side, was not affirmed in the process. And we found that this could lead to misrecognition. So the second theme we found is ambivalence. And so this is the picture of Multicultural Youth Awards, and we had the opportunity to interview the recipient of a similar award. So Yanu, a 21-year-old student and the youngest of 4 siblings of a single mother, received this award. And while he appreciated the cash prize from the award, he depicted the whole experience as not entirely positive. And because he did not know the criteria for the award or why he was selected, he thought that he received the award simply because he was a multicultural youth. And the thought of receiving the award that he did not necessarily earn reminded him of his rather inferior position in society. So the second generation often found awards and scholarships as not merit-based, and they felt uncomfortable because it was like receiving charity, and this evokes social hierarchies, discrimination, marginalization, and a sense of inferiority. And this also should be understood. We found that within the broader societal context where participants, most of whom were able to pass as Koreans without mixed heritage, were often exposed to backstage racism, and these kinds of top-down awards and scholarships cannot address such racism and even may exacerbate them. So the last theme we found was othering. So by participating in social programs, we found that second generation youngsters sometimes reluctantly became involved in reproducing the dominant narratives of discrimination, poverty, and hardships directed toward immigrants and their children, which lead to othering experience. So Sang-min, who was introduced earlier, described an instance during his military service where he was compelled by his superiors to make negative experiences as the focal point of his narrative of being multicultural. So social programs were often found to become platforms where second generation youth were expected to present narratives that only elicit sympathy and reaffirm their perceived underprivileged position, while failing to consider alternative narratives that foster respect for their non-Korean cultural heritage. So to conclude, we found that social programs failed in terms of politics of recognition and participatory parity. And we also wanted to highlight the importance of including the second generation in designing and delivering social programs themselves, and to recalibrate the mechanisms of social programs to allow non-Korean ethnic identities instead of just this generic multicultural identity to be cultivated and articulated. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for the perfect time management. I'm very impressed. So I should have mentioned to everybody that we will have 20 to 30 minutes for Q&A. So for all the participants, please feel free to add your question in the chat during the course. We'll collect the question together in the end. Of course, you are also welcome to raise your hand and ask a question verbally in the end. But we'll pursue the presentation all together. All right, so the next one is me. So let me share my PowerPoint. Okay. So the title of my paper is Negotiating Ambivalent Identities in Geopolitical Context, Second Generation Use of Chinese Immigrant Mothers in Taiwan. So in Taiwan, when we think about the new second generation or 新二代, most people will think about, children of immigrant parents from Southeast Asia. But like this figure shows that the number and proportion of newborn with foreign mothers in Taiwan, the green indicates those with a mother from Southeast Asia, and the blue, the red indicate those with mother from China. And you can see that they occupy almost half of the second generation, but we heard their voices not as often. So in this paper and also the broader project, I coined the term geopolitical multiculturalism to describe the emerging policy regime in Taiwan. In this regime, pro-immigration discourses and programs serve the additional purposes of enhancing the nation's global image, economic development, and geopolitical security. And new southbound policy, 新南向政策, is a good example of that, which was implemented in 2016 by the Taiwan government. The new southbound policy aimed to increase Taiwan's trade and diplomatic network with ASEAN countries, and at the same time to lessen Taiwan's dependence on China's market. So as a result, now we hear a lot of celebratory discourses about this new second generation, and their cultural differences used to be considered a social liability now has been reframed as national and individual assets. So very similar to what we have heard from the South Korean cases, the second generation in Taiwan now have increased access to multicultural dividends, including scholarship, college admission, travel grant, and internship in Southeast Asia. However, there's a difference between these two subgroups of second generation. For the Southeast Asian, despite all the trouble and ambiguity we have heard in the last presentation, but in general, they are increasingly encouraged to embrace and biculturalism as ethnic options. Or I call this an additional model of identity. By contrast, PRC Chinese immigrants and their children, their similarity, their cultural affinity to Taiwan is, however, considered a threat because they are too similar. Therefore, it is difficult to monitor the boundary. As a result, the Chinese second generation, 中二代, they are facing what I call conflicting model of identity. They are implicated in the tug-of-war of national identity. So in this paper, I argue that geopolitics is an overlooked boundary markers that shape the inclusion and exclusion of immigrants. The effect of geopolitics can be either negative or positive. For instance, a geopolitical rivalry between sending and receiving country can intensify anti-immigrant sentiment. But the receiving country may also favor particular groups of immigrants because geopolitical interest in the sending country. In addition, I propose to study everyday politics. That is how geopolitics is recognized, felt, and lived in people's mundane, ordinary life. And in this particular articles, I borrow the concept geopolitical stigma to describe the situation PRC immigrants and their children are facing in Taiwan. So research questions include two. First, how does the geopolitical stigma associated with China surface in particular contexts and impact the children of Chinese immigrant mothers? Secondly, I look at their identity work or identity management as a context-sensitive, situation-specific, and constantly evolving practice. I ask, how do Chinese second-generation adult children negotiate their ambivalent identities at the intersection of geopolitical tension and multicultural dividends? So due to the concern of time, I'm going to just present you three different approaches of identity work. The first one is obscuring their PRC background. It is still the most common approach among our informants. They think there's no need for distinction since they were born and grew up in Taiwan like everyone else and have no visible differences in physical appearances. Some also consider themselves not qualified to claim an authentic Chinese identity because they don't understand China enough or have not visited China often. Also, many prefer to obscure their family background as a defensive measure against the derogatory image of China as a hostile state or the political others. So, for example, in this example, Chongwen, he is trying to learn Taiwanese language, Taiyu, and actually he became a professional instructor and to use this language practice to showcase his Taiwanese loyalty. Here he said, I think it's necessary to prove that I am Taiwanese, right? He has heard a lot of negative impression about Tongzhan, about Xi Xuetong, right? And he hopes the impression can change because he started to contribute to Taiwanese culture. In another case, I call him Ming Shou, he's trying to pass as a third generation 外省人. 外省人 refers to the ways of Chinese immigrants who came to Taiwan around 1949. The second approach of identity work is what I call reskilling Chinese identity. I want to share with you this quote. May, she described her dilemma. Here she said, quote, I find that I belong nowhere. I cannot completely belong to any of these two places. Oh my God. Okay, so even she sees Taiwan and China as two different countries, but she's still worried that she wouldn't have the opportunity to claim a multicultural niche, or people will just criticize her Chinese connection as some sort of infiltration. So rescaling can be two-way. One way, they are trying to rescaling down their Chinese identity to regional level, such as cities or provinces, instead of China as a nation. So you can see this quote, I identify more with Fuzhou, not the whole of China, or Suzhou is not even like part of China, right? So they highlight their social and cultural connection and downplay the political and ideological dimension of China. They also try to dissociate the PRC state from mainland Chinese people, which refers to their kind relatives and warm childhood memory. And the other way is by rescaling up their Chinese identity. For example, in Jack lived in Shanghai, and he would proudly say his mother is from Shanghai, a global city, and his classmate would be curious about it, especially during China's rise in the global economy. But it is also important to know that this strategy is more likely to succeed if the maternal hometown has a cosmopolitan image, such as Shanghai. Jack's classmate, whose mother is from Changsha, and nobody was interested in his background. And finally, the third approach is what I call search for new identity. In this example, Xiang grew up in China. Xiang grew up in China and relocated to Taiwan at the age of 15. And she came to Taiwan to join her mother and also his Taiwanese stepfather. So she is one of this 1.5 generation who has standing in line to become naturalized Taiwanese citizen. And she is often confused where she actually belongs. But right now in the interview, she say, quote, I think I belong where my mother is. So she feel like because they live in Pingdong, so right now she would have this local identity with her home in Pingdong. And also another example, the Mingshou who tried to pass as third generation Westerner, right now has formed close ethnic alliances with Southeast Asian second generation. And he feels through the connection, he can get the partner and support and speaking for him and for them together. Let me conclude. So in this article, I compare how second generation experience vary by their immigrant parents' country of origin with distinct geopolitical ties to the host nation. And we can see how second generation individuals are actively negotiate their similarity and differences to circumvent stigma and attain recognition. I especially find the creative strategy of rescaling inspiring, especially for people in Taiwan who has know what is happening, with the case of Pei-Chia. And I think it's really important for us to remember the few cases like Yaya is very different from the many, many cases of Chinese immigrants who really working hard to become part of the Taiwanese community. And we also should try to distinguish different levels of Chineseness, the CCP and the Chinese people and Chinese immigrant. And I think this Chinese second generation experience and their identity work is very inspiring for all of us. Thank you. All right, 10 minutes is very short. Okay, so now let me move on to the next presentation. It's Dr. Yeohua Chang from City University at Hong Kong. She's going to present a case actually quite relevant, similar to the case of Taiwan. So please, Yeohua.
Thank you. Okay, here is my case. As Pei-Chia mentioned, it's quite relevant because I'm talking about this group of Xin Yimin, new immigrant from mainland China.
And I study these young people. I mean, most of them grew up in Hong Kong, study in Hong Kong schools. I use this concept, racialization of the 新移民 in my analysis in the article. It's not indeed a kind of discrimination against mainlanders is not very new in Hong Kong. As we know, ever since the 1980s, a lot of mainlanders migrated to Hong Kong, especially through marriage migration. Many of them had been kind of being looked down upon by the Hong Kong people. But now in this research, I focused on the children and young people who experience an intensification of discrimination in Hong Kong due to kind of cross-border politics and tension that happened in the decade between 2010 and 2020. As Pei-Chia has mentioned just now, Pei-Chia used this particular concept called geopolitical multiculturalism. And I may actually make a parallel, a comparison between this geopolitical multiculturalism with here what the young people from China encounter as a kind of geopolitical racism or geopolitical racialization. Indeed, there has been this particular mechanism of racializing a co-ethnic group. In the literature of late racism, we all know that the origin of this literature came from the colonization periods when the white people used race to distinguish or classify these different groups of people with color or those colonized people. But recently we found there's a new scholarship on, they call it neo-racism, which mainly focus on the racism against co-ethnic. That means intra-group racism. So I refer to this particular scholarship to help me analyze this particular situation of the 新移民 young people in Hong Kong. Racialization is a very deliberate process which single out a particular group of people who may not have any physical difference with those who operate this particular process. And as I said, mainlander immigrants from China had been discriminated against by the Hong Kong people because in the past, the differences, the development differences between Hong Kong and China are very obvious, so that most of the immigrants from China are stereotyped by the Hong Kongers as low educated, from rural areas, from a poor background, from poor China. But then, even after 2000, when China began to kind of rise up in terms of its economic development, Chinese people became more rich, or many of them actually are backspender in Hong Kong. But at the same time, there have been different incidences which still make a kind of social divide between China and Hong Kong. We can count, I did not put in my slide here, but we can just easily pinpoint some of those issues which greatly impact on the divide between Hong Kong and China. For example, birth tourism. A lot of mainlanders came to Hong Kong as tourists, but then give birth in Hong Kong that have stress on Hong Kong's medical resources. We have the milk scandal in China in 2009, which also created this milk grab in Hong Kong, or we call it baby formula grab in Hong Kong. We also have this rising of the democratic movements in the whole of the decade of 2010, which also created a lot of tension between Hong Kong and China. And we actually call this decade from 2010 to 2020 a decade of Hong Kong-China conflict. That has made this is the new racism in the emerging scholarship. But the situation in Hong Kong is that within this particular cross-border politics, we find that Hong Kong people are actually fear of the increasing mainlandization of the Hong Kong society, including the so-called the big size of mainlander immigrants. So in the past, we have been using this kind of derogatory name calling on the mainlanders, but increasingly there had been a lot of very negative labels for the mainlanders. Here I quote the old ones, Dailok Zai, Dailok Mui, that means the mainland boys, mainland girls. But then Dailok Lei, for example, the third one, is really a very derogatory label because it means very low class, stupid people from the mainland. So later on, those other labels actually have described the more recent uprise of China as a strong country, like Kang Gok Yan, the people from strong China. But even it's like seems to be less negative, but at the same time is a kind of satire against rich but rude mainlanders. So on the whole, I find that most of these young people growing up in Hong Kong, going to Hong Kong school, have been discriminated against. And my survey on the Xinjiang children or youth, they had been, they all recognize the so-called negative stereotypes against them by the Hong Kong classmates. And what do? They mainly hide their identity. Most of them, the majority of them, had tried their best to hide their identity as a mainlander or Xinjiang. But one thing that often baffled them is the accented Cantonese. Many of them, because they came to Hong Kong at the age of 7, at the age of 10, and they have their heavy accents from their own hometown, either speaking their own hometown dialects or the Putonghua. So I mean the language in China. So that made them hard to hide it whenever they speak. And some of them, because of the negative experience of speaking accented Cantonese, which is the dialect in Hong Kong, had tried to hide by not speaking at all. When they speak very little or very short sentence in order to not reveal their Xinjiang identity. Some of them even have very, very little accent, but whenever they find one or two words which they cannot pronounce correctly, then they will, because of the negative experience, so they will just abandon that particular word. Okay, so besides speaking little, I call this a silencing effect of discrimination. Besides silencing themselves, keeping quiet, they also perform themselves as like a Hong Kong local person. And it's quite interesting to hear all these interviewees saying that how they imitate Hong Kong people speak. Hong Kong people speak often with, mixing up Cantonese with English. So they try to mix up their Cantonese with English. And they also slur words. That means like Hong Kong young kids, they slur their words when they speak. So some Xinjiang young people also do that. My my argument here is within their social world, Xinjiang youth try to distinguish between these two cultural zones. One, when mingling with local people, local classmates, they try to keep quiet. So they behave like a very quiet and shy person. But whenever they are not local people, they will be very loud and bold. Example, when they are in a restaurant only with their own group, that means Xinjiang or mainlanders, they will speak loud. They don't mind speaking Putonghua, and my informants say they billy bala, and then they just free up their ego. This is the two split cultural zones within the social world of Xinjiang youth. That's also why I argue, indeed, this young generation of Xinjiang immigrants, they have been leading a double life in Hong Kong. Whenever they are within their own circle, I mean Xinjiang circle, they can be very free and they don't mind speaking Putonghua. But as long as they are with the local classmate or young friends, then they have to keep quiet a lot in order to hide their Xinjiang or accented Cantonese. On the whole, I find that this kind of split character or features among the Xinjiang has been a particular discovery, I would say, in Xinjiang study. There had been a lot of Xinjiang study in the past in Hong Kong studies, but I guess this exploration deeper into the split social life of the young people from mainland China is kind of new, and I will also project in the coming future, in the increasing intensification of, the increasing mainlandization of Hong Kong, indeed, this disadvantage of the Xinjiang young people may work to the advantage of them because their cultural capabilities in these two different zones may indeed help them in the job market in the coming future, which we become more and more relying on the economic assistance from mainland China. Well, I stop here and let's discuss later.
Thank you. I think Youhua's emphasis on language is very innovative perspective. Again, let me remind participants, please feel free to jot down your questions and comments in the chat. Okay, so now we are moving to Dr. Kim Hyung-mi's paper. She's a cultural anthropologist from Yonsei University. Dr. Ding has been doing a lot of work about marriage immigrants, and we are looking forward to her new research about this second generation. Hyung-mi?
Hello, good afternoon. My title of the article is Crafted Identities, Korean Vietnamese Second Generation Returnees Living in Vietnam. So my aim of research, next slide, please. You know that there is a rapid rise in transnational marriages, especially between Korean men and Vietnamese women. And this is a subsequent impact on children has been researched in many cases. But my aim of this article is that what about the life after the parents divorce or things like that? So my article is try to examine the lives of children born to Vietnamese mothers and Korean fathers who have returned with their mothers to Vietnam after their parents' separation or divorce. So they are nationally Korean, ethnically also Korean and Vietnamese. But what about their return to their mother's countries, how their lives, and then what about what kind of, so my investigation is about how these children navigate their dual identities and the significant roles their mothers and kins play in their identity formation living in Vietnam. So next slide, please. So my question is that how do legal and societal challenges in both Vietnam and Korea affect these children's lives? And what influence do returning Vietnamese mothers and family members have on their children's cultural identities? So finally, why Koreanness become future capital, perceived as future capital? What about identities of these children are actively crafted by their Vietnamese mothers and caregivers, emphasizing the preservation of their Korean heritage and future assets? Next slide. So I conducted research with other co-researchers. We are doing surveys, including mothers and grandparents and aunts and uncles. And we did the qualitative research involving in-depth interviews for 3 months in year 2019. So their in-depth interview participants include returning mothers and children aged 15 or more, and the caregivers from southern Vietnam, cities like Can Tho, Hậu Giang province, and Ho Chi Minh City. So we did conduct this research with the collaboration with the Korean NGOs, which is called the Korean Vietnam Together Care Center, which is located in Can Tho. And next slide, please. So let me just briefly explain that what kind of legal economic precarity these children suffer. So Korean Vietnamese children live as alien or undocumented in their mother's country. So they constantly need to renew their passport and obtaining residence permit through a visa every 3 months or to 1 year, depending on that the places they live. So economic precarity is very severe. In our research, that 67% of children in our research lost contact with their Korean fathers. Only 7.5 received support from their Korean fathers. So all their caring is done by the Vietnamese mothers and their kin members. So many of these women, mothers, encounter severe economic hardships. So a large percentage of the mothers of Korean Vietnamese children earn less than Vietnamese dong, which is about US $215, and a significant portion has no stable income. So they need to take care of their children because they are very young. So many are unemployed due to the need to take full responsibility for child rearing. This economic vulnerability is compounded by the legal and social complexities of their situations, where they often rely on familiar support to meet basic needs and care for their children. So next slide. So the mothers and also the kin members develop a sense of what is the meaning of good parenting and care for these second generation children living in Vietnam. So the role of these mothers and their families in Vietnam is not only about providing for immediate income needs, but also about strategically planning for the future of their children. So they actively engage in what is termed the work of waiting. Is this a continuous effort to maintain and cultivate their children's Korean identity as a crucial future asset? So concept of waiting for the right time or waiting for the child to reach the adulthood is a significant aspect for the strategy employed by Vietnamese mothers and the caregivers of Korean Vietnamese second generation children. So because work of waiting means that until they reach the adulthood age of 18, they rather kind of settle down in Vietnam, or they need to go back to Korea for work, or sometimes for further education. So when children reach the age of 18, they are legally considered others and then can make independent decisions regarding nationality, migration, education, and employment. So in the context of Korean and Vietnamese children, reaching adulthood allows them to decide whether to live in Vietnam or South Korea. So this age marks a crucial transition where they can actively choose to relocate to Korea or further education or employment opportunities without needing a parental consent. So next slide, please. So that the mothers and their caregivers develop a long-term strategic approach until the children reached on age of 18. So they engage in many efforts to ensure that the children have better future opportunities, often seen in the context of a potential migration to Korea for economic and educational advantages. So they involve these diverse activities for the children. So mothers and caregivers actively enroll children in Korean language classes, which is taking place every weekend, Saturday or Sundays, to ensure they maintain a connection with their Korean heritages. Because language proficiency is seen as a crucial for future opportunities in Korea, whether for education, employment, and social integration. And so also encouraging participation in cultural activities related to Korea, such as celebrating Korean holidays and consuming Korean media and participating in community events. And legal navigation is also important work for their parents, for their mother and the key members engaged in. So mothers and caregivers undertake significant efforts to navigate complex legal landscapes of citizenship and residency. So this includes managing documentation like a passport and visas to ensure their children retain their legal status as Korean nationals, which is pivotal for their potential return to South Korea. And also there are lots of emotional work and try to reconnect the children to their absent Korean fathers. So they suddenly try to contact with the children's father living in South Korea. In some cases, mothers try to facilitate and maintain relationship between their children and their Korean fathers and their all relatives in South Korea, despite the geographical and emotional distances. Finally, next slide, please. So my implication about my article is about to remind of Arjuna Padrai's notion of the capacity is aspire. So for transnational families, the capacity to aspire can be seen in how families navigate between potential futures and present realities. So the work of waiting, the Korean Vietnamese mothers and their caregivers have done for long years involves nurturing this aspiration within the children. So when they reach adulthood, they are prepared to navigate these opportunities effectively. I will end here. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much. It's a really interesting study to look at, to take a transnational framework to understand the mobilities of the second generation. As Dr. Minjeong Kim mentioned in our introduction, we have emphasized that the traditional division of 1.5 generation and second generation is not always suitable in the case of Asia, and partly because of geographical situation. There's a lot of back and forth mobility, and also like in Dr. Hyun King's papers, we see a lot because of marital dissolution create a lot of transnational family formation. And our next presentation will also touch upon the situation. This will be a very different group of second generation. The author is Dr. Masako Kudo. from J.F. Oberlin Universities in Japan. She won't be here physically today, but she has pre-recorded a video, and we are going to listen to her presentation now. There's no voice. Zixiong, there's no voice. Still no sound.
Professor Lan, you are muted.
Yes, I just want to remind everybody, please feel free to add your question in the chat.
So Xiangyun and I is still trying to play the video, and we can hear the voice, but I don't see it can share to everyone. So maybe wait for a minute.
I would like to begin by expressing my gratitude to Pei-Chia and Minjeong Kim for their leadership in organizing this special issue, and also for the opportunity to contribute to this launch event. I would like to share with you the PowerPoint slides. So the title of my paper is Multinational Migration and Post-Return Identity Negotiation, an intersectional study of Japanese Pakistani Muslim youth. The aims of this paper is twofold. First, it investigates the diverse migration pathways of Muslim youth of Japanese Pakistani parentage, moving beyond the sending and receiving binary. Second, it examines post-return identity negotiations among these youth. To achieve these objectives, I employ an intersectional lens to demonstrate how religion, gender, racialization, and other structural forces intersect to shape their multinational journeys. This study is part of a longitudinal research project that I have conducted among Japanese Pakistani families for over 2 decades. Unlike existing research on migrant women marrying citizen men, this study explores families formed by Japanese citizen women and Pakistani migrant men, revealing unique dynamics of gender, nationality, and family making. This paper draws on in-depth interviews with 27 participants across Japan, Pakistan, and other countries. The participants comprised 18 female and 9 male individuals, aged 17 to 29 at the time of their first interviews. I followed key participants as they moved across nations. So I'd like to provide a brief background on this type of mixed family and their migration. This form of marriage increased in the 1990s following the surge of labor migration from Pakistan to Japan. After marriage, Pakistani husbands often started transnational businesses, primarily exporting used vehicles. Many families became transnationally split after children reached school age. The reasons were complex, involving factors such as religion, gender, and economic strategies. Japanese mothers and children relocated to Pakistan or other countries, while the fathers remained in Japan to continue their businesses. Transnational entrepreneurship and educational mobility were deeply interwoven to shaping the family's migration trajectories. The majority of these children were educated in English medium schools. When relocating to non-Muslim majority countries, families often relied on Muslim diasporas for children's Islamic education. After completing high school or university education abroad, children and mothers tended to return to Japan. Additionally, I explored how the discourse surrounding hahu, a term for children of mixed parentage, emerged in post-war Japan and evolved over time. The main findings. First, many pursued English medium degree programs, not in English-speaking countries, but in Japan, Pakistan, the UAE, Southeast Asia, and Europe. I demonstrated the complex play of strategies and emotions that shape the divergent educational trajectories of individuals pursuing higher education. This includes factors such as economic constraints and the increasing availability of English medium degree programs in non-English speaking countries. Additional influences include ethno-religious gender norms, educational and career strategies, and emotional ties to family and other aspects of transnational life. I also highlighted how their decision-making is shaped by various forms of migrant capital, including social and geopolitical capital. Furthermore, shifts in mixed marriages, such as the rise in divorce and polygamy, have influenced the emotions of some respondents, affecting their migration decisions. Participants showed a strong tendency to return to Japan after completing high school or university. I highlight 3 key findings related to their post-return experiences. First, I framed their experiences within the evolving discourse of hahu and narratives of ethnic homogeneity. Their accounts illustrate how these discourses generate feelings of alienation. Second, these youths actively negotiate their sense of belonging by mobilizing various forms of migrant capital accumulated from their previous locations. Third, their narratives highlight the crucial role of religion and emotions in reshaping their sense of belonging upon return. These factors shape the post-return emotional dynamics, fostering new subjectivities. To conclude, I present three key implications of this paper. First, my findings point to the need for reconsidering migration trajectories of youth of mixed parentage in East Asia. It underscores the importance of moving beyond the conventional sending and receiving dichotomy to develop a more nuanced understanding. They also reveal the intricate interplay of emotions and strategies. As a result, these youths do not necessarily aspire to settle in the West. Rather, their trajectories are more complex. This calls for a reconsideration of migration hierarchies. Even after returning to Japan, they engage in multi-sided transnationalism, which continue to evolve after their return. Their migrant capitals plays a key role in navigating challenges. In this regard, I also highlight language, particularly English, as a key dimension of their transnationalism, in which both racism and religion play significant roles. Second, my findings reveal the heterogeneous experiences of otherization in their homeland. They also demonstrate the diverse ways these youths respond to their marginalization, highlighting the intersection of multiple factors such as gender, religiosity, and migration trajectories. This challenges the essentialized view of children of mixed parentage as hafu. And finally, my findings highlight different modes of incorporation among East Asian nations. Japan lacks state policies specifically addressing children of mixed parentage. This contrasts with state-led initiatives in South Korea and Taiwan, which are critically examined in other papers in this issue. While East Asia is often associated with similar narratives of ethnic homogeneity, national policies toward mixed families and their children vary significantly. These findings highlight the need for further comparative perspectives to better understand how nation-states shape the self-making trajectories of youths of mixed parentage within East Asia and beyond. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you so much for your attention.
Well, thanks very much to Dr. Kudo. I think what I appreciate about editing this special issue is a comparative perspective for us to learn from each other, to see the similarity and also the differences in terms of policy pattern and also social dynamics across different sending and receiving country. So now we still have about 15 minutes and we have some questions in the chat. I think basically these questions are about how second generation might experience difficulties in making new friends or suffer from racism. And there are questions more about the policy implication of our research, what we can recommend the government to create a more inclusive society. And also, the last question is focused on language. How do we see the local language learning or bilingual competency? Is it advantage or capital for the second generation? So I think the authors, you can pick whatever question you like to respond to. And if there's anybody in the audience who like to ask their questions verbally, please also raise your hands. So maybe we can start with Minjeong and Ilju.
So I want to actually address two questions. One is about second generation's experiences in terms of, for example, making new friends or racism. And so first of all, I want to say that, of course, I think racism or xenophobia, they are definitely very much present. And I think that even those who are able to pass as Koreans without mixed heritage, they are keenly aware of racism, which is why they want to pass instead of sharing their mixed heritage identity. And that makes it very difficult for them to be incorporated into the mainstream society. But also, instead of concluding that, they cannot make friends because of their different ethnic identity, I do want to ask a similar question to about the quote unquote mainstream dominant group as well. Can all Koreans make friends easily just because they're Koreans? Some would say, I often hear about people saying that, like some people cannot make friends because of their differences. That may not be about ethnicity, but they could be about socioeconomic status or regional differences because they are from countryside in metropolitan area and things like that. And that can be applied to the second generation as well. Second generation's difficulties may not be completely solely from ethnic identity, but it could be because of their socioeconomic status or their birthplace. Another thing in terms of policy recommendation, for me, I have been kind of arguing for this. There should be more encouragement and support, at least in South Korea, to cultivate their ethnic identity. I'm not talking about multicultural identity, generic multicultural identity, but when their mother is a Filipino, Filipina, then Filipino identity should be able to embraced, or Vietnamese identity, and so on. Because currently in Korea, under quote unquote multicultural policies, they actually discourage, emphasize, supporting single identity initiatives or programs. And I think that really is actually discouraging people to feel more pride about their mother's identity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Ilju?
I would like to echo Minjeong, Dr. Kim's opinion about public policy, and I would like to specifically address Mila Chong's question about public policy, because this is the one I have struggled a lot while writing this article with Dr. Kim. And I basically agree with Dr. Kim's that we need to really encourage the second generation youth to be mobilized around their mother's side of ethnic identity, because some of the positive cases we have observed, and some of those participants who felt actually beneficial about social programs were when they were actually encouraged to affirm their mother's side of ethnicity. So the use of Japanese language or incorporating Filipino identity into their own artwork, when those aspects were encouraged through social programs, it's when they actually felt were actually empowered and kind of valued. So, and as we apply this politics of recognition, I think what the South Korean government have missed was to kind of address this institutionalized patterns of evaluation and interpretation where a certain identity is kind of devalued. So I think public policy should specifically try to address that, not only focusing on redistribution.
Thank you. Yoa?
Okay, I guess for the question of the living experience or socializing experience of the young immigrants, yes, I would say they encountered a lot of difficulties in mingling with local young kids or local the Hong Kong classmates. So that's also why when I was doing the interview, we do feel the great dark side in the minds of those interviewees, because they really need to hide a lot in order not to reveal to others or to their classmates that they are from the mainland. So that particular bad feeling had impressed a lot myself, and that's also why in the university, in classroom, we can feel the segregation between mainlanders and Hong Kong students a lot when they do project and when they do after class mingling. Is really very much segregated. So so we don't know how in the future of Hong Kong, whether this kind of co-ethnic divide will be diminished in whatever sense. Pei-Chia talked about this geopolitical dynamics. I'm quite interested in maybe delving in more into this particular concept, how state policy may direct that kind of dynamic, so that, well, on the one hand, some particular groups who are looked down upon in the past may actually feel a bit of lifted, right, through the policy of the state. But on the other hand, like in Hong Kong, that, as I said in my last line, there can be a reverse discrimination. I don't know if you understand, because now mainland China have played a big part in Hong Kong's different aspects of Hong Kong society. So the policy structure, the policy, either economic policy and other policy, had been very much relying on mainland China nowadays. So in some sense, those who are more adaptable towards mainland China or mainland culture may enjoy an advantage over the years. So in the literature, we also see a lot of literature on reverse discrimination. That means those dominant groups may encounter discrimination by those minorities. So like in America, they talk about white kids being discriminated by the minorities, the colored people, in a intermixed race classroom. So I'm thinking maybe in the coming future, more can be studied and explored in this direction.
Yeah, I think Hong Kong's case is really more complicated, because even though in terms of number, the Xing Yiming may be minority, but in terms of political power, right, their association is actually more powerful. So I think the situation is a bit different from Taiwan. Yeah, but maybe Hyun-mi can go first.
I also know that there are really huge numbers of Taiwanese, Vietnamese children living in Vietnam. When I did the field research, they returned with their mothers after their parents' separation or a divorce. But they also very implicated in, they just also situated in legally ambiguous situation that so each Taiwan, I don't know about exactly Taiwan, but Vietnam and Korea doesn't allow any person to have a dual citizenship. So this kind of strict rules of national sovereignty issues that we only have one citizenship doesn't apply to this kind of transnational relocation of the children's resettlement or reincorporation in their mother's country. So if I say that one of the public policy suggestions that I would like to present is that how can you develop new transnationally more inclusive forms of care that allow these children have more access to the stable residency rights in both countries, and also even have a more dual citizenship access to kind of application applying for the dual citizenship. And one thing that I also at this moment that try to push the Korean government to think about how we incorporate this the second generation children living in Vietnam as a Korean national is that maybe they have access to some kind of child food allowances the Korean government just offers to any child living in South Korea, as well as living outside of South Korea. So yeah, stabilize their more economic their instability while they are growing up and have access to education or other forms of a better life. Okay.
Thank you. So I think I can respond a little bit to the question about the bilingual cultural advantage. So well, right now there has been a lot of discussion in Taiwan, probably to some extent in South Korea as well. But in the past, when people talk about bilingual competency, people usually emphasize children with immigrant parents from North America or Europe, right? Like they talk about English or other European languages. But increasingly, people are starting to embrace the value of Southeast Asian languages, although that, like I mentioned in my talk, is also related to the geopolitical or economic value of the New South Wales policy. But in fact, among the second generation we talked to, many of them grew up not speaking their mother's language, right? Because we have to remember they grew up in a policy regime that emphasized so much on assimilation and even viewed their immigrant background as a liability. So there's a lack or even misrecognition, right? We assume the immigrants' cultural heritage could be automatically delivered across generation, but it is actually not the case. And so I think if we actually wanted to acknowledge the bilingual advantage of the second generation, we need to have the environment to support their learning of their mother tongue. That includes, for example, whether we can have a vibrant migrant community to support them, and whether there are like transnational connection with their home country, and also most importantly, whether we can perceive immigrant culture and language as a cultural rights. And I think without this institutional recognition, without this community support, all those discussion about multiculturalism will only be reduced to very essentialized static perspective that also make this second generation experience what Minjeong and Ilju talk about in their paper, right? They feel ambivalent and feel like imposter, lacking cultural authenticity. And the other thing I like to add is I think a lot of attention has been put on the Southeast Asian second generation. I think my research and also Yowa's research point out co-ethnic marriages are actually very common in the region. And their children are often overlooked. They are becoming this invisible subgroup in the second generation. And in fact, also many of them also encounter transition in terms of education or cultures or social integration. And many of them also experience geographic stigma or racism, especially with the rising geopolitical tension between China and Taiwan. They often become scapegoats in the broader context, and I think their experience and their voices are something we need to recognize and listen to. Okay, so I think time's up. I'd like to thanks again to our authors and presenter, and also all of our participants from different parts of the world to join the discussion. So I think we have someone who raised her hand. Is by accident or not? Do you want to say something? Yes? Okay, it's probably just an accident. But anyway, I think I like to encourage you and invite you to read our papers. You could find the QR code in the poster to download the articles. If you don't have institutional access, you have trouble to getting the paper, please write to us or write to GARC. We'll be happy to offer the PDF document to you. And we are looking forward to more discussion about this topic. I think this is still ongoing situation, and we need a lot of more attention and also research about multiculturalism and also the second generation. And thank you again. Thanks for GARC to sponsor this event, and I hope we can have a continuing discussion in the future. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.